Frank's leaving. He packed his bag and took the subway to the train station and got on a night train west, up Tharsis to Pavonis Mons. In a few months' time, when the elevator was maneuvered into its remarkable orbit, Pavonis Mons was going to become the hub of Mars, superseding Burroughs, as Burroughs had once superseded Underhill. And as the elevator's touchdown was not far off, signs of the area's coming predominance were already everywhere. Paralleling the train piste as it ascended the steep eastern slope of the volcano were 2 new roads and 4 thick pipelines, as well as an array of cables, a line of microwave towers, and a continuous litter of stations, loading tracks, warehouses, and dumps. And then, on the last and steepest curve of the volcano's cone, there was a vast congregation of tents and industrial buildings. Thicker and thicker until up on the broad rim they were everywhere, and between them immense fields of insulation capture sheets and receivers for the energy microwaved down from the orbiting solar panels. Each tent along the way was a little town, stuffed with little apartment blocks, and each apartment block was stuffed with people, their laundry hanging from every window. The tents nearest the piste had very few trees in them. They looked like commercial districts. Frank caught quick glimpses of food stands, video rentals, open front gyms, clothing stores, laundromats. Litter piled up in the streets. Litter piled in the streets. Not gonna lie, sitting cold, watching a bright moon rise, we are at the edge of a real volcano. Wow, poetry. Yeah, I saw the moon when I went outside. It was really pretty. Then he was into the train station on the rim, and out of the train, and into the spacious tent of the station. The south rim had a tremendous view over the great caldera, an immense, nearly circular hole, flawless except for a single giant scoop bursting out of the rim to the northeast. This scoop formed a great gap across the caldera from the station, the mark of a truly huge sideways explosion. But that was the only flaw in the design. Otherwise, the cliff was regular, and the floor of the caldera was almost perfectly round, almost perfectly flat, and 60 kilometers across and a full 5,000 meters deep. Like the start of a mohole to end all moholes. The few signs of human presence on the caldera floor were on an ant's scale, almost invisible from the rim. The equator ran right across the southern rim, and that was where they were going to secure the lower end of the elevator. The attachment point was obvious. A massive tan and white concrete blockhouse located a few kilometers west of the big tent town around the train station. Running west along the rim, beyond the blockhouse, was a line of factories and earth movers and cones of feedstock materials, all gleaming with photographic clarity in the clear, dustless, thin, high air, under a sky that was a kind of plum black. There were a number of stars near the zenith that were visible by day. Zenith? Is it zenith or zenith? There were a number of stars near the zenith that were visible by day. The day after his arrival, the staff of the local department office took him out to the elevator base. Apparently, technicians were going to capture the leader line from the cable that afternoon. Zenith. Z's nuts. Got him. Apparently, technicians were going to capture the leader line from the cable that afternoon. This turned out to be unspectacular, but it was a peculiar sight nonetheless. Nevertheless, the end of the leader line was marked by a small guidance rocket, and this rocket's eastern-facing jets flared continuously, while the north and south jets added occasional spurts. The rocket thus descended slowly into the grasp of a gantry, looking like any other landing vehicle, except that there was a silver line extending up from it. A straight, fine line that was only visible for a couple of 1,000 meters over the rocket. Looking at it, Frank felt as if he were standing on a seafloor, observing a fishing line dropped down among them from the plumb sea surface. A fishing line tied to a bright, colorful lure, in the process of snagging on a bottom wreck. His blood burned in his throat, and he had to look down and breathe. Deep. Very peculiar. We've been waiting like 3 chapters for this space elevator, by the way. Hype! They toured the base complex. The gantry that had captured the leader line was located inside a big hole in the concrete block. A concrete crater with a thick ring of a rim. The walls of this concrete crater were studded by curved silver columns, which held magnetic coils that would fix the cable butt in a shock cushioning collar. The cable would float well off the concrete floor of the chamber. The cable would float well off the... I'm not saying it would float well, I'm saying it would float well off. You know? Okay. The cable would float well off the concrete floor of the chamber. The cable would float well off the concrete floor of the chamber, suspended there by the pull of the outer half of the cable. An exquisitely balanced orbit. An object extending from a moonlet down into this room. An object extending from a moonlet down into this room. 37,000 kilometers in all. And only 10 meters across. How many feet is 10 meters? $32 feet. 32.8 feet. Wow. And only 33 feet across. And okay, wait, how many miles is 37,000 kilometers? Don't worry, I've got it. To 23,000 miles and 23,000 miles and 32 feet across. Wow. It's beautiful. An object extending from a moonlit down into this room. 37,000 kilometers in all, and only 10 meters across. With the leader line secured, the cable itself could be guided down fairly easily, but not rapidly, as it had to drift down into its final orbit very gently indeed, in an asymptomatic approach. It's going to be like Zeno's paradox, Slusinski said. It's going to be like Zeno's paradox, Slusinski said. So, it was many days after that visit when the butt of the cable finally appeared in the sky and hung there. Over the next few weeks, it descended ever so slightly. Ever more. Okay, sorry. I'm like fucking it up because I'm reading chat at the same time. Over the next few weeks, it descended ever more slowly, always there in their sky. A very odd sight indeed. It gave Frank a touch of vertigo, and every time he saw it, the image of standing on an ocean floor returned to him. They were looking up at a fishing line, a black thread hanging down from the plumb sea surface. God damn it, dude. Frank's inner monologue is freaking me out. Oh, asymptotic. Thank you. I probably did read that wrong. I did. In an asymptotic approach. Thank you, Purple Wayne. Another gold sticker for you. A gold star sticker. He's a good noodle. A black thread hanging down from the plumb sea surface. Frank spent this time setting up the head department of Mars offices in the town, which one day was christened Sheffield. The borough's staff protested the move, but he ignored them. He spent his time meeting with American executives and project managers, all at work on various aspects of the elevator or Sheffield, or outlying Pavonis towns. Americans represented only a fraction of the workforce on hand, but Chalmers was kept busy nonetheless. Nevertheless, because the overall project was so huge. And Americans appeared to be dominating the superconducting and the software involved with the actual elevator cars. A coup that was worth billions, and which many people gave Frank credit for. Though it was in fact his AI and Slusinski who were responsible, along with Phyllis. Many of the Americans lived out in a tent town east of Sheffield, called Texas. Some of these parts are too real. Like, you know what I mean? There's absolutely gonna be an American town on Mars called Texas. God damn it. I petition for an American town on Mars called Michigan, okay? And I also think that we should continue with the names that are full of despair and destruction. Like, I actually think every town on Mars You know, because Mars is like the god of war. Like, all the towns should have names like Pestilence and Plague and there should be a town called Despair and Paris. Cause like they've got moons. The moon's name is Phobos. And I don't know what Deimos means, but you know, like we gotta keep with the naming like the naming theme. You know, I like that. A Martian city called Fear. Or yeah, you know what I mean. Texas. Welcome to Scourge, population 2. And the other guy's a robot. Very peculiar. Frank spent his time setting up the head department of Mars offices in the town. Sheffield. Americans appeared to be dominating the superconducting and the software involved in the actual elevator cars. A coup that was worth billions, and which many people gave Frank credit for. Though it was in fact his AI and Slasinski who were responsible, along with Phyllis. One's the god of fear and one's the god of panic during battle, both Ares or Mars' sons. Beautiful. Yeah. So, we have to name all Martian cities after panic and fear. Welcome to the Martian city. Domination. Wormwood. Welcome to Fear and Loathing. You can gamble here. Yes, the City of Desperation. Oh, it'd be so great. Like, it'd be so goth, too. This feels so goth, too. Mars, should be goth-themed. Domination, Wormwood, Fear, Loathing. They're great names. That would be a beautiful name for a baby girl. Many of the Americans lived out in a tent town east of Sheffield called Texas, sharing the space with internationals who liked the idea of Texas, or had just ended up there randomly. Frank met with as many of them as he could, so that by the time the cable touched down, they would be organized and working with a coherent policy. Or under his thumb, as some put it. No vowels are required. Because we're also going to be using like names from fucking Lovecraftian Cthulhu language. Makes it scarier if you like cut out the vowels. And it will be pronounced budzum. Okay, Texas, or they just ended up there randomly. Frank met with as many of them as he could, so that by the time the cable touched down, they would be organized and working with a coherent policy, or under his thumb, as some of them put it. But happy to be there, as long as it gave them any clout. Gen Z mentioned, let's go. As long as it gave them any clout. They knew they were less powerful than the East Asian Commonwealth, which was building the elevator car shells, and less powerful than the EEC, which had constructed the cable itself, and less powerful than Praxis, and Amex, and Armscor, and Subarashi. But it made them feel better. Eventually, the day came when the cable was going to touch down. A giant crowd gathered in Sheffield to see it. The train station concourse was jammed to well over capacity, as it had a good view along the rim to the base complex, popularly referred to as the socket. As the hours passed, the end of the black column drifted downward, moving more and more slowly as it approached its target. There it hung, not much bigger than the leader line guiding it down. Smaller, in fact, than the business end of an Energia rocket. It stood up into the sky, perfectly vertically. But it was so thin, and the foreshortening was so severe, that it looked not much longer than a tall skyscraper. The foreshortening. She doesn't know about foreshortening. It looked not much longer than a tall skyscraper. A very skinny, tall skyscraper walking on air. A black tree trunk, taller than the sky. "We ought to be right under it, down on the floor of the socket," one of his staff said. "There'd be headroom when it stops, right?" "There'd be enough headroom when it stops, right?" "Magnetic field might scramble you a bit," Slisinski replied, never taking his gaze from the sky. As it got closer, they saw that the cable was knobbed with various protrusions and filigreed with silver lines. The gap under it got smaller. Then the end of it disappeared into the base complex, and the seashell roar of the crowd in the concourse grew louder. People watched the TVs closely. Cameras inside the socket showed the cable come to a slow halt, still 10 meters above the concrete floor. After that came the tweezer-like movement of gantries and the clamping of a physical collar around the cable, a few meters up from its end. Everything happened in a dreamlike slow motion, and when it was done, it looked like the round socket room had suddenly gained an ill-fitting black roof. Over the loudspeaker system, a woman's voice said, "The elevator is secured." There was a brief cheer. People moved away from the TVs and looked out the tent walls again. Now the object looked much less strange than it had when hanging out of the sky. Now it was nothing more than the reductio ad absurdum of Martian architecture. A very slender, very tall black spire. A beanstalk. Peculiar, but not so unsettling. The crowd burst into 1,000 conversations and scattered. All right, I bet you $1 they start calling it the beanstalk. And I have to pee very badly. I'll be right back. Thank you for listening. God bless you all. God bless America, and etc.